what was there? Okay, I used the word revenue. You understand about money coming in. Maybe at the moment there's not a whole lot of that. How many of you have actually started charging people to come to things? Couple? Great, excellent. Yep. You can let them pay by donation, you can let them pay by doing the vacuuming, you can let them pay by all kinds of ways. The opportunity to practice is a perfectly valid exchange, particularly at this stage. So that's good to be starting. Okay, so basically it's the fees you charge by the number of people that pay them. There's a fairly kind of limited range of options for where the money's coming from. We talked about expenditure. Money goes out very readily. There are many, many possible directions it can go in. So there's all the expenses of actually hiring the hall and doing the publicity and putting petrol in your car and all those things. But I've divided the expenditures into two groups. One related to the doing of the professional activity and one relating to management. Often the management is something that we do in our own time in the evenings after everything else has been done, initially anyway. Okay, we talked about relationships, sense of self, and it's always useful to take a little bit of time to reflect on how is my self-image changing and moving in the direction of what it is that I want to become. Community is an interesting set of relationships. We all belong to lots of different communities. We're part of, at the moment, the CS2 student group. That's a community of support and resources. We're part of the wider Feldenkrais community. Some of you are taking advantage of being part of a worldwide interest in watching the summit and the talks and things there. And we also have lots of local communities that can provide opportunities and also expectations about what's appropriate and what's not. We talked about the environments. So that's something that Zoran's mentioned quite a bit in these days, is how do we create an environment in which to support somebody's learning and discovery? So it's partly the location, the neighbourhood, it's partly the building, it's partly the bits and pieces that we have inside, and it's partly how we interact and set up that kind of relationship with the people that we're working with. And then of course there's the clients that we will build relationships with as well. We talked about communication and all the different kinds of communicating that we need to think about at different times. Some of those you will have developed excellent skills in as you've gone through life with all the various things you've done up until now. But there may be some that you particularly want to figure out, how can I practice this so that I feel more comfortable, or that it's more effective in terms of whatever it is I'm trying to achieve at the moment. And we talked about the idea that all this is set in the flow of time so that things do evolve and change as we go along. Okay. Now, another interesting thing to reflect on is the cultures that influence us and quietly, often well behind the scenes, shape what we do. The first culture we encountered was the culture of our family. What's expected of us? What kind of attitudes do we develop to opportunities and threats? What kind of attitudes do we develop to money, to work, to relating to other people? And so they can continue to offer support and encouragement, and they can subtly offer constraints that it's useful to pay attention to and address. The communities in which we live. Local community possibly is a source of clients. Do we have kind of relationships with various aspects of that? Do we know the people in the tennis club? Do we know the hairdresser and her client group? Do we know the people that belong to groups which talk to each other? Our local communities will have a socio-economic flavour to them. Some will have quite diverse subcultures, and some of them might be fairly similar. Does that mean that we're constrained to work with the expectations of the local group in terms of how we set our fees, in terms of what we offer? Some of us choose to live in areas where the socio-economic status is lower than other areas. We make choices about whether that's where we want to establish our practice or whether we go and set up a clinic somewhere else where there's more people and more money. Sometimes we will do both, so that we might have a practice part of the week close to home where fees, or the fee expectation, the fee possibility is at one level, and part of the week we might put on our glad rags and commute to somewhere else where the fee expectations are quite different. Is that an option? Do you have two separate websites? Do you offer differently named programs? You know, it may be that, you know, Wednesday's easy moving class, which has a fee at this level, is described and promoted differently from the one over here, which is the elegant, effortless movement, which has a completely different fee and a different description. Who knows? But there are things that are important to think about. Okay, interest groups. Do some of you belong to sporting clubs or interest groups or performance groups? They're often a fantastic source of, at the very least, practice opportunities, because this is an area of life that you know something about, that you know the language, you know the needs, you know what might be useful for those people. So at the very least, finding some people who you can begin to try things on and practice with, but hopefully in due course, maybe they can actually become a client group as well, because you can speak well to their needs and interests. The Feldenkrais method has a culture. And Zora and I have been chatting over the past weeks about how it seems to be becoming more and more limited in terms of what we understand the Feldenkrais method to be. That there seems to be an expectation that ATM and FI are the Feldenkrais method, that ATM is done lying on the floor for 45 minutes once a week, that FI is done lying on a table for approximately 45 minutes, usually in silence. But are you starting to discover that there's more than that? Now, the other night I was driving home down Canterbury Road, which is a major arterial road. There are a number of churches along there that have billboards that are seen by thousands of people on a daily basis. And for many years I've cringed as I've driven past and thought, should I write to them and say, get someone who understands communication to do your billboards for you? However, I drove past one this week that said, don't let Christians put you off Jesus. And I thought, yes, that's a message. And I want to say, don't let your experience of Feldenkrais practitioners put you off Feldenkrais. Okay, there is so much more that can be done. There are people all around the world who are driving very nice cars and taking very fancy holidays from their work as Feldenkrais practitioners. There are people who are taking Feldenkrais into all sorts of environments where it's not the primary label, but it's making a fantastic contribution. There are all kinds of different ways we can take what we know to be valuable and make an offering, provided that we pay attention to the local cultures, the local needs, the local interests, and use our toolkit and our skills to offer something that's actually relevant to what people want. So I look forward to hearing down this river of time all the exciting and amazing ways in which we are sharing what we have with people in ways that are in demand and are exciting and rewarding for us. Okay, life. Life provides opportunities and constraints. I mean, for some of you, you have the opportunity of being away from home and leaving all the responsibilities behind you, more or less, for a couple of weeks so that you can pay attention to being here. Some of us are constantly juggling. Do all the stuff at home, rush here, do the stuff here, rush home, do some more stuff. That's the reality. And so our Feldenkrais practice, our Feldenkrais work, sits in that context and culture. And so all the activities related to just living kind of affect how we go about building a practice and how we relate to other people. Time waits for no man or woman. And so if we want things to happen in a timely manner, then that takes planning, it takes interaction, takes resources. Now, I want to share with you this idea of what shape do you want your time to take. Often it's easy just to get so busy with stuff that we just keep constantly dealing with whatever's most urgent. But if you were to step aside from the busyness for a moment and think about how would you like your year to be shaped? Are there times when you would like to have high activity work, lighter activity work, holidays? How would you like your month to be shaped, or your week? Do you actually plan to have time off or family time, or sit at my desk and prepare time? And so thinking about the shape of things that would work for you, and then what's the shape of time and activity that your client groups have. So if I choose that I want to work with people who are working 9 to 5 to help them have a higher quality of life, but my office is only open 9 to 5, then that says something about how I need to structure my offering, that it has to be in their workplace. Otherwise, we're not around at the same time. If I'm comfortable to shape my time so that maybe I have an extra day off during the week to go and pursue my hobbies, but I work a couple of evenings, or I start late a couple of days and do Saturday sessions so that there's an overlap, then that's going to work. But if I work 9 to 5 with all my stuff, and then I do evenings and Saturdays as well, and then I'm frantic with all the life activities on the day and a half that's left to me, that's probably not terribly sustainable, and the quality of the offering will diminish over time. So shape and pattern and rests. We know about rests. Are you good at building them into your life and your day? And of course, our self-image is something that's evolving. It has moments of being strong and proud. It has moments of running away and hiding. So what's the culture that you're creating and that is influencing how you go about building your practice? Come on. Oh, there's some more. Was there? No, just that's the operating context. Okay. Now, let's talk about money. So it's really exciting when the money starts to come in. Is that right? Okay. So the first little bit comes in and it pops into this little pig, and it gets gobbled up very quickly with the overheads of actually putting on a service, the hiring the room, the getting there, the buying your equipment, all the bits and pieces that are directly related to providing the service. Okay, once things start to grow a bit and there's a bit more money coming in, it goes into this next little pig. And that gets gobbled up fairly quickly with the professional overheads, because you definitely want to be part of the guild. You want probably to have your insurance. You definitely want to come and do a bit of advanced training and continuing education. So it takes a while until those little pigs are satisfied and there's enough money to start to reimburse you for your time, for the skills that you're sharing with other people. It's the year of the pig. It's a fantastic year to be really preparing and heading in that direction. Okay. Gradually over time, we start to build the practice to the point where we can live off it for as much of the week as we choose to. Now, you may choose to build a full-time practice relating to this work. You may choose to do it part-time and do something else part-time. That's entirely up to you, but you'll still go through these stages of working towards actually getting something back. Then eventually, when you're paying yourself a reasonable amount for the work that you're sharing with other people, slow down. You'll start to pay yourself for doing all the other stuff. The keeping the records, the doing the banking, the ringing up about the bookings, the answering the phone calls, all the other stuff that goes into actually being able to run a business. Now, that may be something that you choose to do yourself and eventually pay yourself for, or it may be something that you choose to outsource and you pay somebody else to look after. If you work in a shared clinic, maybe there's a practice manager that looks after a lot of all that stuff for you so that your time can be spent preparing for your classes and your workshops and actually delivering them. But somebody will need to get paid for it eventually. There was something that we probably missed. Let's see if we can actually make this go backwards. All right, I'm going to do it again. Watch really carefully. Whoop, there he goes. Did you see that little hand pop in? Eventually, when all these things are being paid for and you're doing quite nicely, thank you very much, the tax man will come along. And he will take a little bit called GST. So it's not something that you need to take into account at the moment. You may choose to register for GST if it enhances your professional image and you choose to do that, because it's 75 now, I think. But at some stage down your pathway to success, that will need to be considered. And then, of course, there's what's left over. After you've paid for all your time, all your expenses, there's a profit. Many small business people get confused by thinking that once they start to pay their professional salary, they're making a profit. They're not. Profit is what's left in the business after people have been remunerated and all the expenses have been made. And a sustainable business will plan to make a profit so that you're actually better off than just sticking your money in the bank. So that you have opportunities to invest in growth and development, so that if you have a bit of a lean time or you want to take a longer holiday, there's something there to sustain you through those times. Okay, so that's all the little piggies. Oh yeah, cool. Well, if you feel moved to pray at the shrine of the pig, this is obviously the year to do it. Yes, excellent. Okay. All right. Then we think about all those things that fall into that business activity category. What are you going to do with your time? Now, hopefully, as much as possible is spent on delivering the service. But you already know that in order to run a class, how long does it take to prepare? Now, that probably will get a little bit shorter as you gather experience, as you start to build up your set of cheat sheets or whatever it is that you have, that it'll be quicker to pull one of those out and refresh yourself on the lesson and be able to go and teach it. As you have multiple classes, you can teach the same class from the same preparation several times and start to get a little bit of economies of scale. But then there's the dealing with the people. It does actually take time to say hello to them, to listen to their stories about what's happened this week, make appointments, do all that kind of stuff. You have to actually allow time to get to where you want to go. If you're not running your practice in your lounge room, then there's time from here to the hall. There's time from here if you do home visits. All those things will take part of the day. There's your preparation time. There's the answering the phone calls, people ringing up wanting to explain in depth about their woes and how you're going to be able to help them. There's the housekeeping, the washing the towels and vacuuming the floor and all those basic things. Bookkeeping doesn't need to be complicated or time consuming, but it does take some time. And if people give you money in cash or checks, it has to be put in the bank. Whoops. You have to initiate communication, as in, how are you going to let people know that you're there? So all your publicity and promotion, whether it's simply putting something out on your Facebook page, whether it's going to the printer and getting flyers that you stick around town, whether it's writing a newsletter to your client base, whether it's going and talking to potential referrers or going and talking to clubs and organisations about how what you do might be of interest to them and their members. Those things require not only doing, but planning and setting up appointments for community meetings. Being part of a community does involve being part of a community. It means going to the events or the business gatherings or the AGMs or the whatever it is, in order to build the relationships and sustain them. And then of course there's your professional development, the opportunities to continue to grow your skills and your knowledge. And that might be just sitting down and reading a book or reviewing one of those summit talks. It might be getting together in a study group with some of your mates. It might be going to some kind of workshop or advanced training. But they all need to be built into the day and the week and the year. Starting to recognize the shape? So you've made this huge commitment to be here and develop all these fantastic professional skills. But as you've just seen, there's a hell of a lot more than just being able to run a nice class or give a fantastic FI. I'm encouraging you and hopefully supporting you a little bit in developing some of these management skills in order that you have a system that is sustaining. And the reason I've chosen to put all that stuff into that shape is because this is a shape you already know a lot about. Okay, you know that if you change one thing in one part of the system, something else will change somewhere else. Sometimes that's really helpful, sometimes it's profoundly confusing, but we know that if we look at where's the place that I have access to begin working with this system, then often that's the easiest place to start to influence other parts. We don't start with the biggest problem. We start with what's possible and expand that and look for the links and the connections and the relationships. We build our awareness of what's working and what's comfortable. And maybe we go and ask our mates or get some help with the bits that are not so comfortable or that are out of our awareness that we want to get some help, to get some insight into. And so my big message for today is, if you can take what you know and overlay it on something that's perhaps less familiar, it will give you really useful insights and processes for working into something that over time is going to become fantastic. Any questions or comments? Is it switched on here? Is there a little light inside? Switch it once. Maybe it's out of battery. Okay.
Thanks. I met with a bunch of ladies for dinner, and yeah, definitely the easiest way to get the whole point across was to just do the lesson, because yeah, you definitely start, well, I do, start rambling and babbling and loving it and trying to get them to love it, and they don't know what I'm talking about still. So yeah, I know you've said that before. The best way, well, the easiest way is to just do a little 5-minute miracle thing. And yeah, it was really cool to watch them all. And I think there was about 8 of them, and I just did a little turning thing. And just all the, I think there was at least 4 or 5, woo, at the end of it, kind of thing. So yeah, definitely the easiest way that I've found, rather than trying to explain it.
Did you get the sense that they were able to connect that in some way to their life, that it might be relevant to want more?
Yeah, because they all had a glass of wine that they had finished, and no one wanted to order another one because we'd already had dinner and that, but we kept the glasses there. And although we'd done this backwards turning thing, I said to them, put your glass of wine, or the empty glass, over the other side of the table, and then reach for it and use that opposite thing. I just got them to sense it for a moment and go, how would you reverse that? So yeah, it just gave them a little task, I suppose, with that they could use that, what they'd just learned. So there was quite a few more oohs, like.
Fantastic. And
So,
did you
yeah.
have a sign-up sheet with you?
No, I didn't.
But you've got their email addresses, right?
Yeah, and look, I'm lucky because it was a client of mine that I do a little bit of Feldy stuff with her, and she started coming to my ATM. So it's her, like a community group that they, I think they've got their fingers in a few pies with community stuff. So it's, yeah, a really good little networking group. and beautiful bunch of ladies from probably 60 to 75. Who, yeah, so it was really, really nice night.
Fantastic. So any other stories on alcohol?
I got lots, no.
It's not only the year of the pig, it's the year of the drunken pig.
Jenny, if you have not much time to organize and you have to decide spending time in online, like trying to advertise yourself online, Facebook, blah, blah, or going to the community events, in your experience, like, I don't know, going to community lunch or places like that, what do you think is, I know every community is different, but where do you think you're going to use your time? Because having little kids...
The first thing to use your time is in listening. To listen to what are people saying that there is a lack of in their life, or that they don't know how to deal with, or is bothering them. The second use of your time is to think, do I have something that would be useful to help them deal with that? And then the third use of your time is to craft that into an offering that here's something that might help you deal with something that you care about, because otherwise we're just wasting our time and breath. Definitely go and listen to people, read in the Facebook posts and things if that's where you want to communicate about what people are saying they're concerned about or upset about or frustrated about. But if we don't listen first, then there's no point in trying to communicate. Okay?
Brilliant.
Yes, I am. There is a publication called You Can Make a Living as a Feldenkrais Practitioner by Miriam Levinson. She wrote it when she was living in the States about, must be getting on for 15 years ago now. She has made it available. I think it might even be on the AFG website. It's certainly around. Kevin's managed to find it. It's certainly worth a browse through. She takes a fairly traditional kind of standard business model approach to, know what your product is, go out and tell people and, make a lot of phone calls, and which if you're a generally kind of outgoing, chatty kind of person might work well for you. I would still counsel you to listen first and carefully craft an offering. Much in the same way as we do when we put our hands on people. Because those are the skills that we know. They're the things that we're good at. And they work in many, many different applications. Anything else? It's time for a cup of tea. Raymond?
I was always a good arborist, but not a very good manager. And I learnt the hard way along the way is if you want to make money out of it, focus on your management skills. The successful business people in the trades that I've talked to, their business skills govern how much money they make, not how their physical skills are. Your trade skills become secondary, which sounds sad in a training to talk about that, but I encourage anyone that wants to have a successful business, go and study business that sounds really harsh, but that's, you know, if you want to have a crack at it, that's good. And then you can afford to make a better offering. I know in my early days of being a tree surgeon, I couldn't offer a product with the right equipment because I wasn't charging enough to buy the equipment. And that's something I learnt the hard way. And I probably wouldn't be here looking at another career if I'd done it properly. I'd be here laughing, yeah, just doing it for fun, yeah. So yeah, it's look at the management very seriously. Yeah, it's important. And the money is the last pig's yours. That's serious. And have 2 bank accounts. Put all your feldy in one bank account, and that's not your money. And make sure that you get a wage from it. Then it's yours. Yeah. And that was a big turning point in my business. I actually started a second bank account and said, that's the business account. And then I looked at mine and said, there's nothing in it. Where do I get it from? That account. And then I made sure that account grew. And that was a totally different way of looking at it. Not that I'm just going to work, got a bit of money, that's cool. I actually said, right, I'm working for this bank account here. I want some of it. Yeah, so that was, I still got 2 bank accounts. And it will become the Feldy bank account.
Excellent.
Yeah, and on that thing about growing a business, I mean, not that I'm, but my husband and I have a business that we've built, and one of the things that we do with that is make sure we built reserves. So there's a whole lot of reserves in terms of insurance, so that if somebody was to sue you, you actually have the reserves to be able to pay out. So that there's always a block of money that's never touched until the whole year has passed, and then that becomes the money that you can transfer into the business operation.
Is it a very dangerous business that you?
No, but people are paying for a license, and if they don't, you know, if they want their money back because they're not happy with the stuff, that remains untouched until the license their claimability is gone, and then it gets transferred.
Cool. Was the battery properly in? Sometimes it bounces out. Just check that the battery's pushed in. It's on.
We keep it like that?
Just 1 second.
I'm saying it's probably personal because where I work is in the yoga file, and it's really interesting to listen in what the people needs are. You know, you see in a studio where I work is a lot of teachers, and all the classes are full, and they do all this hard work, yoga. And I keep listening how many injuries they have. But when they come in to Feldenkrais, they feel like not doing anything. So
that's one of those cultural influences. It's part of the world we live in.
Yeah, so it's really tricky for me to build a bridge, to make the people to feel kind of talking the same language at the beginning, and then when they in and they trust and they know in doing, you know, working hard is not the answer, they can actually come and convince that it's not for old people, that it's not for people with traumas, that it's not, they're not doing anything. But it's like a really slow process. And I've been really interested in to see how I'm gonna listen in them better to give something there is, you know, my business is still quite good. So I'm not putting a lot of effort in trying to convince. I don't want to convince anyone.
Yep.
But also it's like, walking in and I see all these classes are full, but people going to the physio the week after because they have injuries. So these two businesses where I live, they're really popular. You can't really have an appointment for a physio because it's always booked up. And you can't really have a place in a younger yoga class because it's always booked up. And then you go to Facebook, Casamania, which is a group of it, and it's all about injuries. So I'm going, it's like a lot of potential, but I don't know the language.
What do you think you could offer people who keep injuring themselves? Do we have anything that would be useful?
Yes, no, I'm offering this, but it's not. I'm offering Feldenkrais.
No. They don't want Feldenkrais.
No.
They want to be able to do their yoga, and maybe they want to be able to do it without getting injured. What could you offer them?
Well, I come up with this project called Grounding to Move. It is a yoga and Feldenkrais principles.
Mm-hmm.
It is not Feldenkrais. Got Feldenkrais just at the very end. It's like kind of not there. And so I do yoga and I approach it from a Feldenkrais point of view, like it's slow and not pushing your lip, blah, 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 all of that. And some people get it, but they get back.
So what do they want?
Injury management. It's really interesting for me. Help me.
I had a very, very...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's recognizing where they're at. I had a farmer who was just so stuck in his view of the world that everything had to be done by force. That's what he'd done all his life. And he was in his 60s. And so I had to talk about this particular movement. How do you use that piece of equipment? Could you do it differently? And if you did, would it be easier? And it was about awakening and we actually did things like physically actions and things that he did. And I said, well, what if you added that part of your body? And so it's giving them an experience of how they could do whatever it is that matters to them, which in this case is yoga. But this was done in conversation. We did it in a cafe. I mean, like it wasn't as though I did it. Yeah, we did it when I met him down the street because he was often injured. And I would say, well, if you did it a different way, what would happen? It was just that, not while I was in the room, but in the conversations when they talked about his injuries.
You've got to get them in the same room to converse.
Okay. All right. So I have a friend who is a yoga practitioner who trains the yoga teachers. And he stays with me at my house once a year for a month. And he says, so we have these big discussions about the similarities between Feldenkrais and yoga. And of course, he has never done any Feldenkrais. But I've done a lot of yoga. So I said, look, I don't know how many up your asanas you do. Doesn't matter how many of those you do. If you haven't done any of this, then you don't know what you're talking about. And I think you could actually apply the principles of the thing that you're looking for in yoga is that micro movement, right? So let's come and do an ATM with me down in where you're living, down at the bottom of the garden. And anyway, this was the day before he was about to start his training. And I did So I did a, what do you mean? He did this awareness through movement lesson, and he said, I applied everything in the training the day after. He said, you've got to come and do some awareness through movement lessons before the training of my next session. So because we looked at we discussed all the shared ideas that yoga have with Feldenkrais. And he said exactly that. He said, when I did it, I didn't feel like I was even injuring myself. And he'd only done one session. He was just like, I've got to do more, because they are so compatible in their thinking, and the principles are the same.
Yeah. Yeah, so both of these are examples of having an individual conversation. If there are people in Castlemaine who are complaining because they keep getting injured, would they be interested in a workshop about moving without injury, or yoga without injury, or gym without injury? Getting more out of your membership. They don't yet know what Feldenkrais has to offer. So offering a Feldenkrais class or gentle yoga Feldenkrais stuff, it will mean something to the people who actually come. Yoga Kreis, yeah. That's great once they know you and what you're offering. But we have to begin with speaking the words that make sense to them. And the words that make sense right now are a cup of tea.
Thank you. Thank you for that.